The 1970s may be remembered for avocado green appliances and shag carpets, but the real innovation was happening in suburban kitchens. During a period of economic instability, with high prices and gas shortages, American families found creative and tasty solutions using ground beef. These recipes, simple and affordable, were the stars of many dinner tables, feeding and satisfying people in surprising ways. Let's explore 25 dishes from that era that shaped American cooking and kept families together. Hamburger gravy over mashed potatoes was born as a response to tight times. What seemed like a leftover from the Great Depression came back as a lifesaver in the 1970s when meat got expensive and the recession squeezed the dinner table. From Ohio to Oregon, families made 1 pound of ground beef feed 6, and the secret was in the skillet. First, the meat browned in cast iron. Without washing anything, flour went into the hot fat, stirred until it toasted and became the base. Milk came in little by little, and the gravy thickened with pepper and little bits of meat. Over a buttery mash, it arrived hot, sinking into the potatoes and creating small, salty islands. It wasn't just food. It was proof that dinner happened even when the paycheck didn't stretch. And when you took the first spoonful, you understood why this dish still grabs attention. If this trip down memory lane, bringing back old ground beef recipes from the U.S., has you hooked, go ahead and subscribe and hit the bell. That way you won't miss the next stop in this culinary time capsule. There are still plenty of decades for us to explore together. Porcupine meatballs. The name sounds scary, but the story is different. No real quills, just white rice mixed into the ground beef that, as it cooks, starts to poke out and creates that spiky look. In the 1970s, this dish was a constant at church lunches and PTA gatherings across small-town America because it was cheap, it stretched far, and it brought people together. You mixed meat, uncooked rice, onion, and an egg, shaping balls about the size of a golf ball. The twist came when they went into a thick tomato sauce made with Campbell's condensed soup, since fresh tomatoes were a luxury. On low heat, the rice soaked up the sauce, swelled, and pushed through the meat from the inside, making everything tender with a texture somewhere between stuffed peppers and meatloaf. And there's still a detail in this method that almost nobody notices the first time. In 1970s ovens, porcupine rice bake became a survival trick for a lot of moms who were always on the run. Instead of shaping meatballs, the whole mixture went straight into the casserole dish. Ground beef, uncooked rice, and seasonings mixed well, forming a single layer. In the heat, the grains swelled and broke through the surface of the meat, creating the famous quills, while everything cooked without needing constant attention. The secret was the sauce, thin tomato soup, or a combo of tomato sauce and beef broth, which the rice absorbed little by little. In the final minutes, the pan was uncovered, the top browned, and got a light crispness, and all you had to do was throw together a quick salad and some garlic bread to make it look like life was under control. At the table, the steaming dish pulled in hungry kids and tired adults, serving up hearty comfort with minimal effort. Back when nobody talked about microwave meals, Salisbury steak was a survival trick in the kitchen. Inspired by Dr. James Salisbury's ideas that meat was the foundation of good health, it helped many families turn 1 pound of ground beef into a dinner that looked way more expensive. The secret was the binder. Breadcrumbs, an egg, and a little milk made the mixture firm and generous on the plate. Shaped into oval patties, they went into the skillet until they formed that golden crust, then came out to make room for onions to brown slowly. In the same pan, flour and the flavorful bits stuck to the bottom turned into a rich brown gravy that looked like Sunday, even on a random Wednesday. Moms made extras, froze them for another day, and kids swore they were eating real steak, never realizing that luxury started with everyday ground beef. In the 1970s, someone had an idea. What if meatloaf became something muffin-sized? Smaller pieces bake faster, so the dish that used to take an hour in the oven could hit the table in way less time, perfect for families running between kids' sports and Tupperware meetings. The base stayed the same: ground beef, breadcrumbs softened in milk, egg, chopped onion, and a little ketchup for sweetness. The change was the pan. Instead of pressing everything into one big loaf pan, the mixture went into well-greased cups, turning into little loaves that baked in about 25 minutes, each one with an all-around golden crust. On top, ketchup with brown sugar made a shiny glaze. With instant mashed potatoes and canned green beans on the side, it was the meal that kept up with that decade's rush without leaving anyone without dinner. Tater tot casserole was peak convenience culture in the 70s. In Minnesota, it went by the nickname hot dish and handled dinner with three staples of the American pantry: ground beef, cream of mushroom soup, and frozen potato cylinders invented by Ore-Ida in 1953. The fun was in the ritual. First, brown the meat with onion, then spread it all in a 9-egg 13, pour the condensed soup straight from the can, and line up the frozen tots one by one, almost like a mosaic. In the oven, that setup turned into a bubbling block with a crispy potato top and a dense, creamy inside. The sound of a fork breaking through the top layer to reach the filling marked mealtime at church lunches, funeral receptions, and simple neighborhood get-togethers. A reminder of how the U.S. embraced the idea that cooking could be fast and fully industrialized. Chipwreck casserole looks like it came straight out of a church flyer, but it became a star on American tables in the 1970s. At some point, someone looked at ground beef, condensed soup, and a bag of potato chips and thought, all of that together has to work. It worked so well it started showing up at community lunches from Texas to Michigan. The logic was simple. The meat was browned in a skillet and mixed with cream of mushroom or cream of chicken soup, making a thick sauce. That base went into a dish, got a layer of crushed chips, and if there was any, that pre-shredded orange cheese joined the party. In the oven, the chips on top stayed crunchy, while the ones mixed into the sauce became salty pockets that soaked up the creaminess. Every bite hit crunchy, soft, and that over-the-top feeling from a time when processed food didn't bring guilt. It brought curiosity. In the 1970s, when money was tight and breakfast started creeping into dinner, the beef and potato hash casserole showed up as a practical fix. Instead of corned beef, you used ground beef. Instead of fresh potatoes, frozen hash browns. Everything designed to save time. You browned the meat, mixed it with thawed potatoes, cream of celery soup, sour cream, and shredded cheddar, spread it in a dish, and topped it with cornflakes mixed with melted butter. The oven did the rest, creating a crunchy top and a soft, steaming inside, with the beef adding heft and the cornflakes bringing contrast in every bite. Plenty of families still crowned it with fried eggs, doubling down on the feeling of breakfast served at the wrong time in a if it's good and fast, it works for any meal kind of mood. In a lot of kitchens, rag mop casserole was born from mixing forgotten pasta in the pantry with some ground beef browned well with onion. No waste. Broken spaghetti, elbow macaroni, or slightly old fettuccine all went into the same dish. Canned tomatoes went in too, plus a little sauce, and that can of cream of mushroom soup that helped thicken everything and made the filling smoother. It was seasoned with salt, pepper, and whatever herbs were still holding on in the garden before going into the oven until it started bubbling. If there was cheese, it went on top and formed an irresistible crust. The pasta soaked up the flavor of the beef and tomatoes, got hearty, and every bite reminded you that the whole meal came from leftovers. In the end, it was simple food meant to last for days and feed the whole house without draining the wallet. In the 1970s, a different idea came out of American ovens. Turning spoon bread, a Southern classic somewhere between cornbread and pudding, into a stage for hamburger meat. Cooks who'd been making the dish for generations started spreading. Over ground beef browned with onion and bell pepper, a cornmeal batter whisked with milk, eggs, butter, and baking powder, more liquid than regular cake batter. Nobody knew if it was a main dish topped with cornbread or cornbread stuffed with meat, and that was exactly the charm. In the oven, the topping wrapped the filling and puffed up like an almost soufflé. When it came out, the corn crust was golden and gently firm, while underneath everything blended into big spoonfuls, half casserole, half cornbread filling, bringing together Southern memory with the Midwest love of big shareable baking dishes. In the 1970s, when so-called Mexican food started showing up on Midwest tables, a lot of people met it through a ground beef enchilada casserole. Instead of rolling enchiladas one by one, families built everything in one dish, thinking of a rushed Tuesday night dinner. Ground beef browned in a skillet with a packet of seasoning like Old El Paso or Lowry's, while a can of enchilada sauce waited on the side, mild enough that nobody would turn up their nose. Then came the layering. Strips of corn tortillas, the meat mixture, canned refried beans, shredded cheese, almost always cheddar, since Mexican cheeses were rare at the grocery store. In the oven, the casserole bubbled until the cheese browned and the tortillas turned into something between pasta and a chip, ready to be topped with sour cream, lettuce, tomato, and sliced black olives. Beef and bean burrito bake became a practical way to bring Mexican food to the Midwest table. Instead of building burrito after burrito, the family spread everything into one pan. First came ground beef browned with taco seasoning, canned beans thickening the mixture, and a generous handful of cheese. Flour tortillas acted as the base, getting the hot filling, more cheese, more tortilla, in simple layers. On top, enchilada sauce and another shower of cheese sealed it. In the oven, the tortillas softened and felt like lasagna noodles, while the surface formed an inviting crust. Each slice showed clear layers of filling like Tex-Mex cake slices. It was the kind of dish you brought to community lunches, church parties, and neighbor get-togethers, always expecting one more round at the table. In the 1970s, the American table started flirting with regional cuisines seen as exotic, but always adapted for suburban comfort. That's where ground beef jambalaya bake came from, a casserole version of Louisiana's rice dish designed to fit into 45 minutes in the oven. The ground beef is browned with the holy trinity of bell pepper, onion, and celery, often swapping fresh for dried flakes from the pantry. Then come canned tomatoes, white rice, and the ingredient that gives the era away: a packet of onion soup mix, replacing broth, herbs, and patience. Everything goes into the baking dish with water, gets covered with foil, and you wait for the rice to cook. The result isn't New Orleans jambalaya, but it's a hearty, bold dish that left the family feeling like they'd traveled without leaving the kitchen. It was the balance between culinary curiosity and a deep love of convenience. Beef bake with corn chips was born from improvising. One day, instead of throwing out a stale bag, someone dumped it into the dish and decided to see what would happen. The ground beef was fried until it got color, got whatever seasonings were in the cabinet, and mixed with beans, corn, and diced tomatoes, making the pan feed more people. On top came a shower of crushed corn chips and whatever cheese was hiding in the fridge. In the oven, the smell filled the house, the cheese melted, the chips turned crunchy, and nobody remembered it started as a pantry patch job. On the table, next to a simple lettuce and tomato salad, it felt like party food and showed, in real time, how one quick idea can change the mood of dinner and make room for other kitchen inventions that were still on the way. In the family recipe notebook, this dish showed up under all kinds of names: goulash, one-pot mac, Sunday mashup. Deep down, everyone was making the same thing: a quick, cheap meal that made the kitchen smell like a full house. It started in post-war cafeterias and took off in the 1970s when money was short and creativity had to stretch the paycheck. First came ground beef browning with chopped onion until it made that flavorful layer at the bottom of the pot. Then went in elbow macaroni, canned tomatoes, and whatever vegetables were left from the week. Bell pepper if you had it, corn if it showed up, shredded cheese when payday hit. Everything cooked together, the pasta soaking up the juices, turning into a thick stew. Nobody would call fine dining, but everybody recognized as the kind of food that hugs you without asking questions. During that 1970s crunch, when grocery money ran out before the end of the month, cabbage became a survival trick in American kitchens. It cost next to nothing and went a long way when mixed with a pound of ground beef. It was a habit from Irish and German families, but the recession made it cross neighborhoods and last names. First, the meat went into that old green electric skillet, browning with onion until it made the house smell good. Then went in thick strips of cabbage, sizzling in the hot fat, getting Worcestershire sauce, salt, pepper, and on better days, a can of tomatoes. It cooked until soft and a little sweet, soaking up the beef flavor and turning a few dollars into a full pan, served steaming with white bread to mop up the plate. It was simple, fast, and kept everyone at the table watching for the next bite. Long before boxed meals hit the shelves, plenty of people were already handling dinner with a heavy skillet on the stove, ground beef sizzling, and a handful of pasta waiting its turn. It was the trick to make the meat stretch further and feed everyone without drama. First you browned the meat, breaking it up with a well-worn wooden spoon. Then came garlic powder, common in pantries where fresh garlic hardly showed up. Next went in elbow macaroni, strong broth, and a squirt of ketchup or tomato sauce. Everything simmered together, slowly, until the pasta was tender and soaked through with flavor. At the end, you tossed in shredded cheddar and watched it melt into thick strings through the bubbling mix, making that one-pan meal fast, cheap, and ready to handle another busy night. Before cans promised dinner in minutes, a lot of people still stood by homemade sloppy joes. It was almost a statement against rushing in the kitchen, a recipe passed down from older siblings, a school cafeteria memory turned into something a little more cared for. First, the pot got ground beef, onion, and green bell pepper, browning until it built that flavorful base. Then came the sauce, ketchup, brown sugar, mustard, Worcestershire sauce, a splash of vinegar, and sometimes tomato paste or hot sauce. It simmered until thick, messy, but not soupy. It went straight onto a soft hamburger bun that could barely hold all that filling. With chips and pickles on the side, it was the classic weekend scene. Everyone around the table, napkin in hand, and always somebody asking for seconds. Hamburger steak with ketchup topping was basically a little kitchen magic trick. The ground beef got only the basics: breadcrumbs, egg, salt, pepper. What made it special was what went on top: ketchup, brown sugar, a little vinegar, and a touch of Worcestershire sauce turned into red brushstrokes that, in the heat, darkened, stuck to the surface of the patty, and formed a shiny crust. Every time the meat was flipped, it got another layer, and the flavor built up. Sweet, tangy, lightly salty. The smell took over the whole kitchen, and when it hit the plate, next to creamy mashed potatoes and green beans, that cheap patty didn't feel like a thrown-together meal anymore, but something made with care, able to fool even the most skeptical looks, worthy of a Sunday table. In the 1970s, the peak of the mock trend was the mock prime rib hamburgers. Instead of a pricey roast, ground beef became the star when money was tight. Families mixed the meat with breadcrumbs, Worcestershire sauce, garlic powder, and the quiet pantry star. Liquid smoke, that trick that gave an apartment stove the smell of a backyard grill. The patties were made thick, seared in a skillet until they had a strong crust, then bathed in a sauce made from condensed mushroom soup, stretched with red wine or beef broth. They didn't go on buns. They went on plates, next to baked potatoes and canned asparagus, like special occasion steaks. Nobody confused it with real prime rib, but when the fork cut in, the smell, the sizzle, and the gravy were enough to make the table feel almost fancy for one night. Meat ring with biscuits. Even the name sounded like a promise of a special dinner. It was the kind of dish that made guests think you'd spent the whole afternoon cooking, but it still fit into a regular Tuesday for a 1970s housewife. The ground beef went into the skillet with onion and seasonings, sometimes corn or green beans for color. Meanwhile, refrigerated biscuits came out of the tube and were arranged in a circle on the baking sheet, slightly overlapping, forming the ring. The browned meat was piled in the center, and the dough ends were folded over the top, leaving part of the filling visible. After 30 minutes in the oven, out came the hot ring, soft biscuit outside, full of juices inside. On the table, it looked like a magazine recipe. In real life, it was 15 minutes of work and the cozy feeling of having outsmarted the clock with nothing more than a simple Pillsbury tube. Picture walking up to the table and finding a steaming dish. On the bottom, browned ground beef mixed with cream of mushroom soup and a few colorful vegetables. On top, pieces of refrigerated biscuit dough torn by hand, scattered like a savory cobbler. In the oven, everything transforms. The meat releases its juices, the sauce thickens, and the biscuits rise, creating golden tops, while the bottom soaks into the creamy mix. Each bite brings that contrast of crisp and soft, sauce and dough, simple and indulgent at the same time. It's the kind of recipe born in the age of convenience products, but it wins because it respects a basic rule. Combine textures and flavors in a smart way, without complication. It doesn't take fancy technique, just the willingness to build the right layers and let the oven do the work while the smell fills the house. It was called beef tamale pie, a name that sounded like it came from a ritual, but the move was pure kitchen engineering. Think of it as the American cousin of shepherd's pie. Instead of lamb, well-browned ground beef, lots of corn kernels, a few vegetables, and everything stacked in firm layers. First the skillet, beef with onion until it smells good, then in go corn, peas, and the thick sauce made with flour and broth. That filling goes into a deep dish and becomes the base. On top, a heavy layer of mashed potatoes, leftovers or instant, smoothed with a fork to create ridges that would bake. In the oven, the mash forms a dry crust on the outside and stays soft inside, hiding the bubbling filling. Breaking through that potato roof with a spoon and reaching the hot beef underneath was the kind of meal that filled up a whole family without draining the wallet. Picture Sunday showing up with money short. Everyday sloppy joes felt too basic, a roast felt too expensive. That's where sloppy joe pie came from. The idea was to take the ground beef, sautéed with onion, ketchup, Worcestershire sauce, and a touch of brown sugar and make it look like a special meal. Instead of going on a bun, the meat went into a dish and got topped with a generous layer of cornbread made from a mix or from scratch. In the oven, the cornbread rose, browned, and soaked up some of the sauce, staying soft inside and slightly firm on top. When it came out steaming, it became a centerpiece dish, served with a quick salad or those canned green beans that always show up to save dinner. And just setting the pan on the table was enough to make everyone feel like that Sunday got an upgrade. In the Midwest, meat pie became an ally for families who needed to feed a lot of people with little meat. The base started in the skillet, with ground beef browning with onion until it scented the kitchen. Then came cubed potatoes, carrots, and whatever else was in the garden, all mixed well to make a big, hearty filling layer. That mixture went into a pan already lined with simple homemade crust made from flour, fat, and water. Another layer of crust went on top, sealing in the filling and giving it that complete meal look that went straight from the oven to the table. When it was time to serve, you just cut slices. Each piece came out with its share of crust and filling, and the bottom crust, soaked with the meat juices, got extra flavor that made every bite feel like a full plate. Perfect for busy days on the farm or in town. In the 1970s, stuffed peppers got a new look. They stopped being a Sunday-only dish and slid into the weekday routine. The same formula showed up in recipe notebooks across the country, changing only in the details. It started by cutting the peppers in half lengthwise, removing seeds and membranes to make little boats. They went quickly into the pot just to soften up. Meanwhile, the filling was born in the skillet. Browned ground beef mixed with cooked rice, often instant, canned tomato sauce, little cubes of onion, and the house seasoning. From an Italian packet to the classic duo of garlic powder and oregano. The halves were filled, stood upright in a baking dish with a little water to create steam, and baked until tender, with bubbling filling and a layer of melted mozzarella on top, giving individual portions packed with flavor and practicality. And that's it for today. If this video gave you ideas for your next dinner, save it so you don't forget and share it with someone who loves practical comfort food full of memories. See you in the next one.